The bitter wind howled across the snow-laden plains of Wyoming Territory. 1878, as Sarah Stevens clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her fingers, red and raw from the cold, trembled as she placed another log onto the meager fire that barely warmed the broken-down wagon where she and Eleanor Sullivan huddled together. Two widows stranded in the merciless winter of the frontier. "The children can't take much more of this," Sarah whispered, glancing toward the back of the wagon where her 8-year-old son Michael and Eleanor's 6-year-old daughter Emily slept fitfully beneath every blanket they possessed. 3 days waiting and still no sign of help. Eleanor's face was gaunt, her once vibrant features now hollow with grief and hunger. It had been only 4 months since she'd buried her husband Thomas after a mining accident in Silver Creek. For Sarah, widowhood was a more familiar companion. Her James had been gone 2 years, taken by the same influenza that had swept through half their settlement. "We should have never left Cheyenne," Eleanor said, her voice barely audible above the wind. "But what choice did we have? With the bank taking everything." The broken axle on their wagon had sealed their fate 3 days ago. They'd managed to drag it off the trail into a small grove of pine trees, but the nearest town, Shoshone, was still a day's ride away. The man they'd hired as a guide had abandoned them after an argument over payment, taking their only horse with him. Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. "We'll make it through. We always do." A sudden noise outside made both women freeze. The distinct sound of hoofbeats approached, growing louder against the howling wind. Sarah reached for the small derringer hidden in her skirt pocket, James's parting gift before he died. "Stay behind me," she whispered to Eleanor, positioning herself between the wagon entrance and the children. The flap of the wagon cover pulled back, revealing a tall silhouette against the gray winter sky. A man's deep voice called out, "Hello, the wagon. Anyone alive in there?" Sarah kept the small pistol concealed but ready. "State your business, stranger." The man stepped closer, his features becoming visible in the dim firelight. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by years under the western sun. His dark beard was flecked with snow, but his eyes, a startling shade of blue, were kind beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. "Name's Adam Xavier, madam. I've got a cabin about 3 miles west of here. Saw your smoke and thought someone might need assistance." His gaze took in the desperate situation, the dying fire, the 2 exhausted women, the sleeping children visible in the wagon's depths. "Looks like I was right." Eleanor moved forward. "Our axle broke. The man we hired to guide us to Shoshone stole our horse and provisions." Adam's expression darkened. "Jenkins, I'd wager. Not the first time he's pulled that trick." He glanced up at the sky, where heavy clouds promised more snow before nightfall. "Storm's coming in fast. That fire won't last, and neither will you folks if you stay out here." Sarah's grip tightened on the derringer. "We're managing." Adam's eyes flickered to her hand, noting the slight bulge in her pocket. A small smile touched his lips. "I'm sure you are, madam, but those little ones deserve better than managing in weather like this." As if on cue, the wind gusted fiercely, nearly extinguishing their fire. Eleanor shivered violently, and Sarah knew their options were dwindling by the minute. Adam looked at them both, then said gently, "There's room for all beside my fire. My cabin isn't fancy, but it's warm and solid. I've got a wagon and team outside. We can bring whatever supplies you need." "Why would you help strangers?" Sarah asked, suspicion edging her voice. Adam's expression grew solemn. "Because 5 winters ago, no one stopped to help my wife and daughter when their wagon broke down not 20 miles from here." He paused, the pain still evident in his eyes. "I was away hunting. By the time I returned." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The two women exchanged glances. Eleanor spoke first, her voice soft but determined. "We accept your help, Mr. Xavier, gratefully." Sarah hesitated a moment longer before nodding. "The children need warmth." Within an hour, they had loaded their most essential belongings onto Adam's sturdy wagon. The children, now awake but groggy, were bundled in thick buffalo robes Adam had brought. As promised, his cabin appeared through the swirling snow after a difficult 3-mile journey, a solid, 2-room structure with smoke rising steadily from the stone chimney. "Home," Adam said simply, helping them down from the wagon. "It's not much, but it's sturdy enough to keep out the Wyoming winter." The interior of the cabin was surprisingly warm and well kept. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across simple but sturdy furniture. A wooden table with 4 chairs occupied the center of the main room, while shelves lined with books, foodstuffs, and tools covered another wall. A closed door led to what Sarah assumed was a bedroom. "You ladies and the children can take the bedroom," Adam said, setting down their bags. "I'll sleep out here by the fire." Eleanor shook her head. "We can't take your bedroom, Mr. Xavier." "Adam, please," he corrected gently. "And yes, you can. I insist." He moved to the fireplace, adding another log to the already substantial blaze. "There's stew keeping warm. You all should eat something." As the children warmed themselves by the fire, their faces regaining some color, Sarah studied their unexpected savior. There was no deceit in his manner, no hidden agenda she could detect. Just a man who understood suffering and sought to prevent it in others. That night, after a filling meal of venison stew and cornbread, Sarah lay awake on Adam's bed, Eleanor and the children sleeping soundly beside her. Through the partially open door, she could see Adam stretched out on a bedroll near the fireplace, his breathing deep and even. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, though he couldn't hear her, "for giving us shelter from the storm." Little did Sarah know that this night of refuge would be the beginning of a journey none of them had expected, one that would transform their broken lives into something whole again. Against the backdrop of the beautiful, brutal Wyoming wilderness, they would all come to call home. The following morning dawned clear and cold. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, finding Adam already up and cooking at the cast-iron stove. The children sat at the table, Michael showing Emily how to whittle a small piece of wood with a pocket knife Adam had lent him. "Good morning," Adam greeted her, his voice low to avoid waking Eleanor, who still slept. "Hope you don't mind, but these young ones were up with the sun." "Michael, you should have woken me," Sarah began, but Adam shook his head. "No need, we've been getting acquainted." He smiled at her son. "Michael here tells me you were headed to Shoshone to start anew." Sarah nodded, accepting the steaming cup of coffee he offered. "There's work there, or so we heard. I can sew, and Eleanor was a teacher back east before she married." "Shoshone's growing fast," Adam confirmed, returning to the stove. "The railroads brought in all sorts, good folks mostly, looking to build something lasting." Eleanor emerged from the bedroom, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. For the first time since Sarah had known her, she looked rested. "I hope we're not imposing," Eleanor said, smiling shyly at Adam. "Not at all," he replied, serving plates of eggs and bacon to everyone. "It's good to have voices in this cabin again." Over breakfast, they discussed their situation. Adam offered to fix their wagon's axle, explaining that he had the necessary tools and experience. "It'll take a few days," he said. "That axle was split clean through. I'll need to fashion a new one." Sarah exchanged glances with Eleanor. A few days in this man's home seemed both necessary and dangerous, not because of Adam himself, but because of the growing sense of comfort she felt in his presence. Comfort was dangerous. It made you forget that happiness was often temporary. "We can contribute," Sarah insisted. "I noticed your shirts need mending, and we can help with cooking and cleaning while we're here." Adam nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes that suggested he wasn't accustomed to taking charity either. That would be most welcome. The days fell into a rhythm. Adam worked on the wagon while also tending to his small herd of cattle and horses. Sarah mended clothes and helped clean the cabin, which, though tidy, benefited from a woman's touch. Eleanor occupied the children with lessons, her teaching background evident in her patient explanations. In the evenings, they gathered around the fireplace. Adam proved to be a talented storyteller, regaling them with tales of his travels across the West, carefully edited for the children's ears. Sarah noticed how his eyes crinkled when he laughed, something he did more frequently as the days passed. On their fourth night in the cabin, after the children had gone to bed, Adam brought out a bottle of whiskey and offered small glasses to both women. "For medicinal purposes," he said with a wink that made Sarah's heart beat unexpectedly faster. Eleanor declined politely, saying she would check on the children, leaving Sarah alone with Adam by the fire. "How long have you been alone out here?" Sarah asked after a moment of comfortable silence. Adam swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Going on 5 years now. After Mary and little Grace died." He paused. "I couldn't stay in town. Too many memories. Bought this land, built the cabin, brought in some stock." "You've done well," Sarah observed, glancing around at the solid, comfortable home he'd created. "I manage," he said, echoing her words from their first meeting with a slight smile. "But it gets quiet, too quiet sometimes." He looked directly at her then, those blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "Having you all here, it reminds me what I've been missing." Sarah felt her cheeks warm and she lowered her gaze. "We're grateful for your help." "Sarah," he said her name softly, causing her to look up. "May I ask what happened to your husband?" The pain was still there, but duller now. "Influenza. 2 winters ago. It took half our settlement in Montana." "James was strong, but—" She shrugged slightly. "Strength doesn't matter much to disease." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And you've been taking care of Michael on your own since then." "We manage," she repeated, then smiled slightly at using the phrase again. "It hasn't been easy. When the bank foreclosed on our homestead, I didn't know where to turn. Then I met Eleanor in Cheyenne, another widow with nowhere to go. We pooled what little we had and decided to try Shoshone." "It's a good town," Adam assured her. "Sheriff Anderson keeps order, and Mayor Wilson has brought in several new businesses. The school could use a teacher like Eleanor." "And what about seamstresses?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Mrs. Holloway runs the general store. She's always looking for fine hand work to sell. And with the new hotel going up, there'll be linens and curtains needing making." He leaned forward slightly. "You won't lack for work, Sarah." The way he said her name made something stir inside her, something she'd thought long dead. She stood abruptly, setting down her barely touched whiskey. "I should check on Michael. Thank you for the drink." Adam rose as well, nodding respectfully. "Of course. Good night, Sarah." That night, lying awake beside Eleanor and the children, Sarah tried to make sense of her confused feelings. Adam Xavier was kind, decent, and undeniably handsome in his rugged way. But she had buried those parts of herself alongside James. Hadn't she? "He watches you," Eleanor whispered in the darkness, startling Sarah. "I thought you were asleep." "I was. Now I'm not." Eleanor shifted to face her friend. "The way he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're water in the desert." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks again. "Don't be ridiculous. He's just being kind." "Kind, yes, but there's more." Eleanor paused. "Would it be so terrible to feel something again?" Sarah had no answer. The question followed her into uneasy dreams of James's face fading into Adam's, of accusations and permissions she couldn't quite grasp upon waking. The next morning brought a change in the weather, a brief thaw that allowed Adam to make more progress on the wagon axle. Sarah found herself watching him work from the cabin window, the strength in his arms as he shaped the wood, the careful precision of his movements. "Mama, when are we going to Shoshone?" Michael's question interrupted her thoughts. Sarah turned to her son, ruffling his dark hair affectionately. "Soon, sweetheart. Mr. Xavier is fixing our wagon." "Do we have to go?" Michael asked, surprising her. "I like it here. Adam's teaching me to ride his horse, and he said I could help with the calves when spring comes." "That's kind of him," Sarah said carefully. "But we can't stay here forever. We need our own place." Michael's expression grew serious, too serious for his 8 years. "But we're happy here." "You're happy here, I can tell." Before Sarah could respond, the cabin door opened and Adam entered, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the scent of pine. "Wagon's coming along," he announced, stamping snow from his boots. "Another day should do it." Sarah felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "That's good news." Adam must have heard something in her voice, for he looked at her sharply before turning his attention to Michael. "How about helping me feed the horses, young man?" As they left, Eleanor emerged from the bedroom where she'd been helping Emily practice her letters. "The wagon's nearly fixed then." "So it seems," Sarah replied, busying herself with the dinner preparations. Eleanor watched her for a moment. "You know, there's no rush. The pass to Shoshone will still be treacherous for weeks yet. It would be safer to wait until the weather breaks properly." Sarah paused in her chopping. "Are you suggesting we impose on Adam's hospitality for weeks?" "I'm suggesting we consider all options," Eleanor said carefully. "Adam mentioned needing help with the spring calving. He's offered fair wages if we stayed to assist." Sarah set down her knife. "When did he discuss this with you?" "This morning, while you were washing the clothes." "He's been alone too long, Sarah." "This place needs a woman's touch." Children's laughter. Eleanor hesitated. "He didn't say it outright, but I think he'd like you to consider staying permanently." Sarah's heart raced at the implication. "That's absurd. He barely knows me." "Sometimes you just know," Eleanor said softly. "Thomas proposed to me after 2 weeks' acquaintance, said he'd recognized his future the moment he saw me. And look how that ended." Sarah regretted the words the instant they left her mouth. "Eleanor, I'm sorry." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, he died," Eleanor acknowledged, pain flashing across her features. "But I had 5 wonderful years with him first. Would I trade those years to avoid the pain of losing him? Never." That evening, Adam didn't join them by the fire as usual. Through the window, Sarah could see him working late in the barn, the lantern light casting his shadow against the wooden walls. After the children were asleep, Sarah wrapped herself in a shawl and made her way to the barn. The night was crisp but not bitterly cold, the stars impossibly bright overhead. She found Adam smoothing the new axle with a draw knife, his movements precise despite the late hour. He looked up at her entrance, surprise giving way to something warmer. "Sarah, is everything all right at the cabin?" "Everything's fine," she assured him, stepping closer to examine his work. "Eleanor mentioned you offered for us to stay until spring." Adam set down his tools, giving her his full attention. "The pass to Shoshone won't be safe for weeks yet. No sense risking it when you have shelter here." "It's a generous offer. Not entirely selfless," he admitted. "I could use the help with the spring work, and—" He hesitated, then continued more softly, "and the cabin feels like a home again with you all here." Sarah met his gaze. "Eleanor thinks you want more than just temporary boarders." Adam didn't look away. "Eleanor is a perceptive woman." The directness of his response took her breath away. "Adam, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing, still finding your way. I just wanted you to know that there's a place for you here, all of you, for as long as you want it. Sarah found herself moving closer, drawn by the sincerity in his eyes. What if I don't know what I want? Then you take the time to figure it out, he said simply. No pressure, no expectations. In that moment, with the scent of pine and leather surrounding them and the quiet sounds of the horses in their stalls, Sarah did something she hadn't planned. She reached out and touched his cheek, feeling the rough texture of his beard against her palm. Adam remained perfectly still, though she could see the rapid pulse at his throat. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he turned his face into her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her palm. The sensation sent warmth coursing through her body. It had been so long since she'd been touched with tenderness, so long since she'd allowed herself to want such a thing. I should go back, she whispered, though she made no move to leave. If that's what you want, Adam replied, his voice husky. Sarah stood on tiptoe and pressed a brief, gentle kiss to his lips. It lasted only a moment before she stepped back, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. "Good night, Adam," she said, turning toward the barn door. "Good night, Sarah," he responded, remaining where he stood as she slipped back into the cold night air. Back in the cabin, Eleanor was still awake, waiting by the fire. One look at Sarah's flushed face told her everything she needed to know. "Not a word," Sarah warned, though there was no real admonishment in her tone. Eleanor smiled. "I wouldn't dream of it." That night, Sarah dreamed not of James's fading face, but of a future she hadn't dared imagine since the day she'd become a widow, a future filled with possibility, and perhaps a second chance at love. The following weeks brought a rhythm to their lives at Adam's cabin. The repaired wagon sat unused as winter maintained its grip on the Wyoming landscape. Adam expanded the sleeping arrangements, building a small separate room for Eleanor and Emily using lumber he'd been saving for a planned addition to the cabin. February gave way to March, and still, they stayed. Sarah found herself watching Adam with the children, patient as he taught Michael to mend harnesses, gentle as he showed Emily how to feed the chickens without frightening them. He was a natural father, though he had lost his only child years ago. One evening, as a late winter storm howled outside, Adam brought out a fiddle Sarah hadn't known he possessed. The simple, haunting melodies he played transported her to another time, to dances she'd attended as a young woman, before hardship and loss had shaped her into the person she now was. "Dance with me," Adam said suddenly, setting down the fiddle and extending his hand to Sarah. Eleanor, sitting nearby, immediately picked up the instrument. "I can play a bit," she offered. "My father taught me." Before Sarah could protest, Adam had pulled her to her feet in the center of the cabin. His hand settled respectfully at her waist as Eleanor began a slow waltz. The children watched, wide-eyed, as Adam guided Sarah around the small open space. "I'm out of practice," Sarah apologized as she stepped on his foot. "You're perfect," he countered, his blue eyes never leaving hers. As they turned slowly by the firelight, Sarah felt something inside her shift, the final walls around her heart beginning to crumble. When the music ended, Adam didn't immediately release her, and she made no move to step away. "I think," she said softly, so only he could hear, "I'm starting to figure out what I want." Adam's smile in response was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. That night, after the children were asleep and Eleanor had tactfully retired to her room, Sarah and Adam sat close together by the fire. "Tell me about James," Adam said, surprising her. "He must have been a remarkable man." Sarah studied him, wondering at the request. "Why do you want to know about my husband?" "Because he was part of what made you who you are," Adam answered honestly. And because I don't want you to feel you need to bury those memories to move forward." His understanding touched her deeply. James was kind, steady. Not one for grand gestures or flowery words, but you always knew where you stood with him. She smiled at a memory. He couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, but he'd sing to Michael every night anyway. Said a child needed to hear his father's voice, even if it wasn't pretty. Adam nodded, encouraging her to continue. Sarah found herself sharing stories of her life with James, their struggles homesteading in Montana, the joy when Michael was born, the simple happiness they'd found together despite the hardships. "He sounds like a good man," Adam said when she finally fell silent. "A man who would want you and Michael to be happy even after he was gone." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "And Mary, what was she like?" Adam's expression softened with remembrance. "Fierce, independent. Could outshoot most men and wasn't afraid to prove it," he chuckled. "We met when she beat me in a shooting contest at a county fair. I was smitten right there, watching her collect the prize money I thought was mine." Sarah couldn't help but smile at the image. "And your daughter, Grace, was it?" She had her mother's spirit and her father's stubbornness, a dangerous combination. His voice grew quieter. "She was only 4 when the fever took them both, so much life ahead of her." Without thinking, Sarah reached for his hand. "I'm so sorry, Adam." He turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm with his thumb. "For a long time, I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd had my chance at happiness and lost it." His blue eyes met hers. "Then you showed up, half frozen in a broken wagon, pointing a derringer at me through your pocket." Sarah laughed softly. "Not my finest moment." "On the contrary," he said, his voice growing serious. "It was the moment everything changed." Slowly, deliberately, Adam leaned forward and kissed her. Unlike their brief exchange in the barn, this kiss deepened, years of loneliness and longing pouring out between them. Sarah's arms wound around his neck as he pulled her closer, the warmth of the fire nothing compared to the heat building between them. When they finally separated, both breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not just until spring. Stay with me, Sarah." "Adam, I'm not asking for promises yet," he clarified quickly. "Just a chance, for both of us to see if what I feel, what I hope you feel too, can grow into something lasting." Sarah pulled back slightly, needing to see his face clearly. "And Eleanor and Emily, they're part of our family now." "Of course they stay too," Adam said without hesitation. "There's room here for all of you. We'll expand the cabin, build proper bedrooms, make this place a real home again." Sarah thought of Michael's happiness here, of Eleanor's growing strength, of the way Emily had begun to laugh again. And she thought of herself, how the hollow space inside her chest had slowly filled with something warm and hopeful. "Yes," she said simply, "we'll stay." The joy that transformed Adam's face was something Sarah knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The moment she chose to embrace a future she'd never expected to find in the wilderness of Wyoming. Spring arrived in a rush of melting snow and greening pastures. As promised, Adam began expanding the cabin, with Michael eagerly helping, proud to be treated like a man. Eleanor took over the garden, her knowledge of plants surprising them all. "I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania," she explained as she carefully planted rows of vegetables. "Before I went east to school." Sarah divided her time between household tasks and helping Adam with the livestock. She discovered she had a knack with the horses, her gentle but firm approach winning over even the most stubborn mare in Adam's small herd. One bright April morning, as they worked together repairing a section of fence, Adam suddenly dropped his hammer. "Marry me," he said, the words bursting forth as though he'd been holding them back for too long. Sarah stared at him, her hands frozen on the fence post she'd been holding steady. "What did you say?" Adam stepped closer, taking her work-roughened hands in his. "I love you, Sarah Stevens. I've loved you since that night by the fire when you told me about James, maybe even before that." He took a deep breath. "I want to build a life with you and Michael. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to adopt Michael as my own son if you'll both have me." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "Adam, are you certain? It's only been a few months. I've never been more certain of anything," he interrupted. "Life out here teaches you that time is precious. When you find something worth holding on to, you don't let it slip away." Sarah thought of their journey from desperate widows stranded in the cold to this moment of possibility. "Yes," she said, joy bubbling up inside her. "Yes, I'll marry you." Adam lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as they both laughed like children. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, unconcerned about who might see. "I love you, Sarah Stevens," he repeated against her lips. "And I love you, Adam Xavier," she replied, the words feeling both strange and completely natural. They shared their news that evening. Michael whooped with delight while Emily clapped her hands excitedly. Eleanor embraced them both, genuine happiness in her eyes. "I told you," she whispered to Sarah. "Sometimes you just know." The wedding took place in late May, with the mountains still capped in snow but the valley lush with spring growth. They traveled to Shoshone, where the small church welcomed them warmly. Sheriff Anderson stood as Adam's witness, while Eleanor stood beside Sarah. The town turned out for the celebration, curious about the reclusive rancher and his bride. Mayor Wilson himself gave a toast at the small reception held at the newly opened hotel. "To new beginnings," he proclaimed, raising his glass, "and to the Xavier family." Sarah, now Sarah Xavier, looked around at the smiling faces her son Michael, standing tall and proud beside Adam. Eleanor and Emily, lovely in new dresses Adam had insisted on purchasing for the occasion, and her husband, whose blue eyes never left her face for long. "To family," she amended, raising her own glass. "Found in the most unexpected places." That night, after returning to the ranch home, Adam carried Sarah across the threshold of their cabin, now expanded with a proper bedroom for them and separate rooms for Michael and for Eleanor and Emily. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said, setting her gently on her feet. "It's been home for some time now," she replied, reaching up to touch his face, the face that had become as dear to her as her own reflection. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Adam's arms securely around her, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From two widows waiting for help in the cold to this, a family reborn from the ashes of loss, stronger for having weathered the storms together. "What are you thinking?" Adam asked, his voice low in the darkness. Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "I'm thinking that sometimes the end of one journey is just the beginning of another." Adam kissed her gently. "And this journey is just beginning." As spring gave way to summer, life at the Xavier Ranch settled into a pattern of hard work and simple joys. Adam's prediction about Eleanor's prospects proved true when they visited Shoshone in June. The town council immediately offered her the position of schoolteacher for the fall term. "You'll come with us, won't you?" Sarah asked as they prepared for the move to town. Eleanor hesitated, looking around the ranch that had become her home too. "Are you certain there's room for us? Now that you and Adam are married, your family," Sarah said firmly. "Besides, you'll need to return to the ranch on weekends and holidays. Emily would miss the horses terribly." The arrangement worked beautifully. Eleanor and Emily stayed in town during the week, with Eleanor teaching at the newly expanded schoolhouse. Weekends brought them back to the ranch, where Emily would run to the corral to greet her favorite pony, and Eleanor would share news of the growing town. Sarah found her own place in Shoshone's community. Her skilled needlework was indeed in demand, just as Adam had predicted. Mrs. Holloway at the general store eagerly displayed Sarah's fine embroidery and quilts, which sold quickly to the town's more prosperous citizens. "You have a gift," Adam told her one evening as she worked on a particularly intricate quilt pattern. "Those Eastern ladies don't know what they're paying for your soul in every stitch." Sarah looked up, surprised by the poetry of his observation. "It passes the time," she demurred. "It's more than that," Adam insisted. "It's your art." The weeks passed in a blur of activity, haying in the fields, preserving fruits and vegetables from the garden, preparing for the coming winter. This time, however, Sarah faced the approaching cold season without dread. Their home was solid, their pantry well-stocked, and their hearts full. In late September, as the aspen trees turned to gold along the mountainsides, Sarah shared news of her own. "A baby," Adam repeated, his eyes wide with wonder as they stood together in the barn after she told him. "You're certain?" Sarah nodded, a mixture of joy and nervousness fluttering in her chest. "Dr. Winters confirmed it yesterday when I was in town. We should expect a new arrival by early spring." Adam's whoop of joy startled the horses. He lifted Sarah carefully, mindful of her condition, and spun her in a gentle circle. "A baby," he said again, as if testing the reality of the word. "Our baby." That evening they shared the news with Michael, Eleanor, and Emily over dinner. Michael's reaction surprised Sarah. "Will you love the baby more than me?" he asked Adam directly, his young face serious. "Since it'll be your real child," Adam set down his fork and regarded the boy solemnly. "Michael, come here." The boy approached, standing straight before his stepfather. Adam placed his hands on Michael's shoulders. "You became my son the day I married your mother. Not by blood, but by choice, and that's a stronger bond. This baby will be your brother or sister, and I'll love you both equally. That's a promise." Michael studied Adam's face for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "I'd like a brother," he declared. "Girls are too noisy." He cast a teasing glance at Emily, who stuck out her tongue in response. "We'll have to wait and see what God sends us," Sarah said, exchanging an amused glance with Adam. That night, as they lay together in their bed, Adam's hand rested protectively over Sarah's still flat stomach. "I never thought I'd have this again," he confessed quietly. "After Mary and Grace died, I couldn't imagine loving anyone enough to risk that kind of pain again." Sarah covered his hand with her own. "I understand. After James, I was certain that part of my life was over." "We were both wrong," Adam said, kissing her temple. "Thankfully." "Thankfully," she agreed, snuggling closer to his warmth. The winter of 1878-1879 proved to be milder than the previous year. Regular trips to Shoshone were possible, maintaining their connection to town. Eleanor's position as the school teacher had elevated her status considerably, and she confided to Sarah that the town's widowed blacksmith had begun calling on her regularly. "Samuel is a good man," she told Sarah during one of their private conversations. "Steady, kind to Emily." Sarah squeezed her friend's hand. "You deserve happiness, Eleanor." "I never expected to find it again," Eleanor admitted. "After Thomas died, I was certain that chapter of my life was closed." Sarah laughed softly. "That seems to be a common belief among widows, and apparently we're often wrong." As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, Adam grew increasingly protective. He insisted on handling the more strenuous chores, enlisted Michael as his deputy in caring for Sarah, and even built a cradle by hand, working on it during the long winter evenings. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, running her fingers over the smooth wood of the finished piece. Adam had carved delicate pine trees along the headboard, reminiscent of the grove where he'd found them that fateful winter day. "I want our child to know the story," Adam explained. How their parents found each other. In late March, as the first signs of spring began to emerge from beneath the melting snow, Sarah went into labor. Adam rode to town through the muddy roads to fetch Dr. Winters, returning with the physician just as things were intensifying. Eleanor took charge of the household, keeping Michael and Emily occupied while the doctor attended Sarah. Adam refused to leave her side, holding her hand through each contraction, whispering encouragement as she struggled to bring their child into the world. After hours of labor, Sarah delivered a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs powerful enough to announce his arrival to the entire ranch. "A son," Dr. Winters announced, placing the swaddled infant in Sarah's arms. "A fine, strong boy." Sarah looked down at the tiny face, already showing hints of Adam's features. "James," she said, looking up at her husband. "James Adam Xavier." Adam's eyes filled with tears as he understood her tribute to both her past and their present. "It's perfect," he whispered, carefully touching his son's downy head. "He's perfect." The family gathered around to meet the newest Xavier. Michael approached cautiously, peering at his baby brother with a mixture of curiosity and pride. "He's so small," he observed, "but loud." "Just like you were," Sarah told him with a tired smile. "Would you like to hold him?" Under Adam's careful supervision, Michael held his brother for the first time, his expression transforming to one of protective awe. "I'll teach him everything," he promised solemnly. "How to ride and rope and fish." "I'm sure you will," Adam said, resting his hand on Michael's shoulder. "You're a big brother now, that's an important job." Emily was next, her small face serious as she studied the baby. "He doesn't do much," she observed critically. "Not yet," Eleanor told her daughter, "but he will, and you'll be like a big sister to him." As Sarah watched her family gather around her bed, Adam beaming with pride, Michael assuming his new role as big brother, Eleanor and Emily completing their circle, she thought about the journey that had brought them all together. From the depths of loss and desperation to this moment of pure joy, their paths had converged in ways none of them could have imagined. Spring bloomed fully across the Wyoming Territory. The ranch flourished under Adam's careful management, with Sarah's help once she had recovered from childbirth. Baby James grew quickly, his cheerful nature bringing joy to everyone in the household. In May, Eleanor shared her own news. Samuel the blacksmith had proposed marriage. "I've accepted," she told Sarah as they sat on the porch, watching Adam teach Michael to throw a lasso while Emily played nearby. "The wedding will be in July." Sarah embraced her friend warmly. "I'm so happy for you, Eleanor. Samuel is a good man." "We'll still visit," Eleanor promised, glancing around at the ranch that had been their sanctuary. "This will always be a second home to us." "You'll always be family," Sarah assured her. The double wedding anniversary 1 year for Sarah and Adam, and the upcoming nuptials for Eleanor and Samuel called for a celebration. Adam suggested a proper party at the ranch, inviting folks from Shoshone to join them. The day of the celebration dawned clear and warm. Neighbors and townspeople traveled out to the Xavier Ranch, bringing food and good wishes. Tables were set up in the yard, and Adam had cleared the barn floor for dancing. As the fiddles played and lanterns glowed in the gathering dusk, Sarah stood beside Adam, watching their guests enjoy themselves. Eleanor danced with Samuel, her face alight with happiness. Michael and Emily chased fireflies with the other children, their laughter carrying across the evening air. Baby James slept peacefully in a basket nearby, undisturbed by the festivities. "Did you ever imagine this?" Adam asked, his arm around Sarah's waist. "That night when I found you in the broken wagon," Sarah leaned against him, content in a way she once thought impossible. Never. I was just hoping to survive the night. Adam's arm tightened around her. And now I know what it means to truly live again, she said, turning to face him. To love again, to build something lasting from the ashes of what was lost. As the music changed to a waltz, Adam led Sarah onto the barn floor. Other couples joined them, Eleanor and Samuel, Sheriff Anderson and his wife, Mayor Wilson and Mrs. Holloway from the general store. You know, Adam said as they turned slowly together, I've been thinking about expanding the ranch. The Johnsons' property to the east is for sale. Good grazing land, another water source. More work, Sarah observed, though she smiled at his ambition. More opportunities, he countered. For Michael as he grows. For James. Maybe for more children if you're willing. Sarah's smile deepened. I might be persuaded. The dance ended, but Adam continued holding her close. I love you, Sarah Xavier, more than I have words to express. Then show me, she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him, unconcerned about the knowing smiles of their guests. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and their guests had departed, Sarah and Adam stood on the porch of their home. The stars spread across the Wyoming sky like diamonds scattered on velvet, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting on that cold winter night. I was thinking, Sarah said, her head resting against Adam's shoulder, about what you said when you found us in that broken wagon. Do you remember? Adam kissed the top of her head. I believe I said something about there being room for all beside my fire. Sarah looked up at him, her heart full. You saved more than our lives that night, Adam. You gave us a future when we thought all was lost. We saved each other, he replied simply. And that's the greatest gift of all. Together they turned and entered their home, closing the door against the night. Inside, the hearth glowed warmly, illuminating the life they had built together, a life that had begun with an act of kindness on a cold winter's night, when two widows waited for help in the cold, and a cowboy opened not just his home, but his heart. 5 years later, 1884, the Xavier Ranch had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. What had once been a lonely cabin with a small herd was now one of the most prosperous operations in the county. The main house had been expanded twice more to accommodate their growing family after James came twins, Robert and Rebecca, now 3 years old and constantly in motion. On this particular autumn afternoon, Sarah stood on the wide front porch, watching Adam and 11-year-old Michael drive a herd of cattle toward the eastern pasture. At 13, Michael had grown tall and strong, the image of his father James in build but with Adam's confident manner. He rode his own horse now, a gift from Adam on his 12th birthday. Mama, look what I found. 6-year-old James came running around the corner of the house, his hands cupped carefully around some treasure. He opened them to reveal a tiny frog, green and alert. Very nice, Sarah commented, smiling at her son's excitement. But remember what Papa said about creatures belonging outside. James nodded seriously. I'll put him by the pond. He dashed off, careful not to jostle his amphibian friend. From inside the house came the sound of the twins arguing over a toy. Sarah sighed, knowing she should intervene before things escalated, but allowing herself another moment of peace. The valley spread before her, golden with autumn colors. The expanded barn and corrals housed their horses and cattle, while new outbuildings served various purposes: a smokehouse, a proper workshop, a bunkhouse for the 2 hired hands who helped Adam with the larger herd. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There had been hardships: a difficult winter that claimed several cattle, a summer drought 2 years ago that threatened their crops, the twins' premature birth that had left Sarah bedridden for weeks. But through it all, The foundation they had built remained solid. Eleanor and Samuel lived permanently in Shoshone now, where Eleanor continued teaching and Samuel's blacksmith business thrived. Their weekly visits to the ranch were a highlight for everyone, especially when they brought news from town or special treats for the children. Emily, now 11, had become a voracious reader and Eleanor's unofficial teaching assistant. The sound of hoofbeats drew Sarah's attention back to the present. Adam and Michael were returning, their task apparently completed more quickly than expected. "Those new cattle dogs are worth their weight in gold," Adam called as he dismounted, his face flushed with exertion and satisfaction. Cutting the work in half, Michael slid from his own horse, grinning widely. "I taught lightning to come when I whistle special. Watch." He demonstrated a distinctive three-note whistle, and one of the border collies immediately abandoned its post by the barn to race to his side. "Impressive," Sarah acknowledged, "but I hope you're not planning to bring that dog to the dinner table tonight." Eleanor and Samuel are coming, and Emily's bringing her school project to show everyone. "Yes, madam," Michael agreed, though he winked at his father when he thought Sarah wasn't looking. Adam came up the porch steps, removing his hat as he approached his wife. Despite the years, Sarah's heart still quickened at the sight of him, his dark hair now showing touches of silver at the temples, his face more weathered but his blue eyes as vibrant as ever. "Everything all right here?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "The twins haven't burned down the house yet?" As if summoned by their father's words, Robert and Rebecca burst through the front door, both talking at once about some grave injustice involving a wooden horse. Adam scooped them up, one in each arm, as they continued their complaints. "Whoa there, partners, one at a time." Sarah watched as he patiently addressed their conflict, settling the dispute with his usual blend of fairness and gentle humor. He'd proven to be an exceptional father, firm but loving, teaching their children by example what it meant to live with integrity. Later that evening, as the extended family gathered around the large dining table Adam had crafted last winter, Sarah took a moment to absorb the scene. Eleanor and Samuel sat across from them, Emily beside them, animatedly explaining her school project, a detailed map of Wyoming Territory with important historical events marked in her neat handwriting. Michael sat tall beside Adam, increasingly aware of his role as the eldest son. James occupied the place next to Sarah, while the twins sat on special cushioned chairs that elevated them to proper table height. "Before we begin," Adam said, rising to his feet and lifting his glass, "I'd like to propose a toast." Everyone quieted, even the twins who recognized their father's important voice. "6 years ago, I was a man who believed his life's purpose was behind him," Adam began, his gaze finding Sarah's. "I had my land, my animals, and my memories. I thought it was enough," he smiled. "I was wrong." He gestured to the table's occupants. "Look what God has blessed us with, not just a family but a second chance. A reminder that even after the darkest winter, spring always returns." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes as Adam continued, "To those we've lost, who made us who we are." He nodded to Sarah, acknowledging James, and to Eleanor, recognizing Thomas. "And to those who brought us together, our children, our friends, and the providence that led 2 widows and a lonely rancher to find each other on a cold winter's night." "Hear, hear," Samuel joined in, raising his own glass. As dinner proceeded, filled with laughter and conversation, Sarah found herself watching Adam at the head of the table, confident, content, surrounded by the family they had built together. She thought of the broken, desperate woman she had been, huddled in that wagon with Michael, certain their future held nothing but struggle. After dinner, while the others gathered in the sitting room, Sarah slipped outside to the porch. The night was clear, stars brilliant against the velvet sky, the same stars that had witnessed their journey. The door opened behind her, and Adam joined her, draping a shawl around her shoulders against the autumn chill. "You disappeared," he said softly. "Everything all right?" Sarah leaned against him, drawing strength and warmth from his solid presence. "Just thinking about how far we've come, how different things might have been if you hadn't found us that night." Adam's arm encircled her waist. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." "The romantic rancher," Sarah teased, though she pressed closer to him. "Only with you," he admitted. "You bring it out in me." Inside, they could hear the children laughing at some story Samuel was telling, his deep voice rising and falling dramatically. Eleanor's gentle admonishment to Emily about sitting properly was followed by more laughter. "We should go back in," Sarah said, though she made no move to leave the peaceful moment. "In a minute," Adam replied, turning her to face him. "I just want to look at you first." In the silver moonlight, his face was as dear to her as her own reflection, the lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled, the strong curve of his jaw beneath his beard, the unwavering tenderness in his gaze when he looked at her. "What do you see?" she asked. "Everything," he answered simply. "Everything I never thought I'd find again. My heart, my home, my Sarah." He kissed her then, a kiss that still held the passion of their early days together, but was deepened by the years they'd shared, the joys and sorrows, the challenges overcome, the life they'd built from the ashes of their past losses. When they finally parted, Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Adam Xavier." "And I love you, Sarah Xavier," he replied, his voice a rumble beneath her ear. "Yesterday, today, and all the tomorrows we have left." Hand in hand, they returned to the warmth of their home, to the family gathered within, to the life that had begun on a cold winter's night when two widows waited for help. And a cowboy with a generous heart and empty home had said, simply, "There's room for all beside my fire." And in that offer of shelter from the storm, they had all found not just warmth, but a love that would sustain them through all the seasons of their lives.